So, the mic broke last time, and I'm trying to just figure out why it kept breaking. But I I did this. I hate to say this, but I did this like what two times earlier today, and it really was kind of disappointing because I uploaded it and it didn't work, and I didn't see anything, and then saw something, but then the audio was taken out like for half of it, and it was just a huge disappointment. So I'm trying to keep the audio live, just like the video is, and we could probably have a decent show. Now, I'm playing Battlefield 1 again, but I don't really know if I'm gonna do that, or because I want to make sure that some of you guys get some music going, like because I have some music to show you. So what I'm gonna do at the end, for like the last 5-10 minutes, is play a song or two, and it'll just be, I guess, a YouTube, but it'll be curated by me, right? So even though it's most of the computer doing the work, there's some human involvement, not completely automated, right? Uh, El Frente. All right, this is We'll play this again because it's the only game I actually like a lot that I have. It's actually not true. I have the other Battlefields. I just don't have any of the maps. Whereas for this game, somehow I have all the maps. So should be good. Alright, I'm gonna light this cigarette, and when I start, I'll just play, and then after I die, the first minute or so, I'll keep talking again. Yeah, so I guess I'm just gonna recap everything I talked about in the last one. And what I kind of talked about was some experiences, uncomfortable experiences I had in some biology courses today. And then I also watched this video on whiskeys, the connoisseurship of whiskey. And really I found that the whiskey guys were kind of a lot of like effeminate type like dudes. Because what they were is that they're ruminating over like the flavors of liquid in their mouth, right? And that's that's their hobby, right? They could be like weightlifters or something, but they ruminate about flavors in their mouth, and they describe them in poetry, like the sea breeze caramel of the elongated ruby. It's just like goofy shit, and that's what they did. And I was like, oh my god, am I going to watch 30 minutes of this? Because the video was a 10-minute video, at core, but they bloated it out to 30 minutes. And I just couldn't live like that. But, they covered some good whiskeys, though. I'm not going to show you the video, recommend the video, because the video was just so atrocious. But they did get to some points, and I think the whiskeys they recommended are some I've tried, and a lot of others that I didn't try. What was it? Maker's Mark. No, Maker's Mark I've had, but Maker's Mark I didn't please me. I'm jogging the memories. I'm jogging the memories. I had personally, I'm not even gonna talk about what they talked about because it was kind of useless info, and I'm a little bit annoyed that I even bothered to watch it. But I'll tell you what I think are some good whiskeys, and you can just roll with it. First of all, there are different kinds of whiskeys. Scotch, right? So a good Scotch, I've had a blended Scotch, which isn't the purest kind of Scotch, but a good rendition of that is Johnny Walker Black, as a starting point. If you're gonna start with any whiskey, and if you're gonna end with any whiskey, Johnny Walker Black, right? And that's a Scotch, blended Scotch, single malt, double malt, I don't even know. The Irish stuff. Jameson is a good entry. Entree is a good entree, right? And then there's something called Macallan. I think that's a Scotch. I don't know much about the Irish whiskey. Another Scotch is called Chivas. It sounds like it's a Spanish drink, but I believe it's just like a normal Scotch, blended Scotch. Alright, let's put this for real. Man, I have gun indecision. Help me out, bro. Help me out, bro. Alright, I don't like this class. I'm not a scout at heart. Yeah, so if you're looking for like a guy who gets a lot of kills and knows how to jump around, go somewhere else, because I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that enjoys the game and rarely the victory. That's kind of, and corn whiskey, and then rye whiskey, and there's also Canadian whiskey. Although, fuck Canada till it dies. I'm not going to talk about that. And no actual hatred. I just think it's funny to rip on Canada because they're clearly winning. So I'm punching up. It's called punching up. Anyway, the American bourbon. It sounds fancy because it has a French name, mispronounced French name, and it's a dynasty. Not just a name; it's a dynasty of the French monarchy, Kingdom of France. So it sounds pretty official. But the weird thing is that bourbon can actually be made. Its origins are in Kentucky. Like, I'm sure you've heard that. But the weird thing is that its bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States as long as it's made. As long as it's stored in American oak, I believe, or French oak, or something of that kind. Whiskey, Tennessee whiskey it sounds just like a lesser version, but it's actually the same as bourbon, the process wise, but it's more involved. Like I think there's a more extensive aging process and a few things here or there, and there's requirements for the purity. Like the recipe calls for a certain amount of there's like a limit to how much corn, the ratio of corn to rye or whatever. I don't know it anymore. I used to know it. I really did, but I just don't know it anymore. Anyway, and Tennessee whiskey though can only be made in, I believe, Tennessee. Furthermore, it might only be able to be made in a certain county in Tennessee. Bourbon is known from a certain county. I think it's Bourbon County in Kentucky, and gets a lot of tourism. And there's a lot of distilleries there, and a huge industry, relative to the Kentucky overall. But it's not, it's not, I've had an excellent bourbon out of Portland, Oregon, called Burnside Bourbon, and it's actually named, stylized after a street called Burnside in Portland, and it's a kind of a double entendre because it's named after the general or the war hero of the Civil War on the Confederate side, Burnside. He actually might have been Union. See, I don't know. This is my stuff. Anyway, that was an excellent whiskey. It's the best whiskey I had. It might have just been the smoothness. It was a smooth whiskey. Jack Daniel's. If you're gonna get a really emblematic whiskey that everyone knows, and you still want it to taste good, get Jack Daniel's. I've fucked with Jim Beam before. Jack Daniel's is a Tennessee whiskey, by the way. So by the definition, it's more involved than Kentucky bourbon like Jim Beam. Jim Beam, I'm not a fan of. I mean, it's good in it's like a cooking whiskey, cooking bourbon. You know what I mean? But so a Tennessee whiskey is actually, it is a bourbon. It's not a whiskey in like the lesser sense of a whiskey. It's a bourbon, but it's like a bourbon that's even more with more strict recipe to follow. But yeah, I mean, I really don't know, the world. I'm not an encyclopedia on this stuff, but oh God, fuck this guy. See, it's that bolt action, right? I'll never get the hang of that. I just don't have the inclination. This is fun because I get 250 rounds, and it's kind of hard not to kill someone with it. Because they're all just afraid of it. It's a giant gun, you know. They're like, oh, that's gonna kill me, and they run off. They flinch. They twitch. You know. They cower. Yeah, but see, I can only get like one gun, one kill. Yeah. So I believe I've had Buffalo Trace before, which is kind of like the whiskey you get if you don't want to ever try a second type of whiskey. You just get Buffalo Trace, and then you never have to concern yourself with, like, you know having the mold. It's like a whiskey for people who don't want to try that hard and they just want something. It's like appealing and it checks all the boxes, and you know, maybe it's a perfect drink. I don't know, but it kind of ruins the fun, the thrill of the chase, right? Like, there's no hunt for the best whiskey if you just kind of settle for Buffalo Trace. There's something called Highland Park, which I hear is like one of the more like it's the snob's choice. If Buffalo Trace is kind of like the hipster choice, then Highland Park is sort of like the snob's choice. I haven't had them yet, but they're on my list. And that's about everything I know about whiskey. Something else I know about rum is I know that I prefer brown rum to white rum, because brown rum is brown like whiskey, but the botanicals are different. Yeah, that's the word, I think, is botanicals. And it's like the same color with different plants, and so you get a kind of a different taste overall, but like you still get that kind of earthy, like centeredness in a liquor. And that's what I like a rum. I've had only a handful of rums, but of the ones I've had, the brown has always been more intriguing. Vodka isn't a very vodka's not really anything special. I did interview, kind of surprisingly, the inventor of Sky Vodka, and he said that he invented Sky by removing the congeners from like an ordinary vodka, and a congener is like a kind of like a byproduct chemical, I believe. And what it did though is it alleviated the hangover on the day after. So, or at least according to him. I mean, I drank it, and I drank a good amount of Sky Vodka, and I didn't get a serious hangover from it. From my memory. But that could just be a hold on 1 second, let me find my other cigarette. I had 2 cigarettes, dang nabbit. 2 cigarettes. Alright, they're gonna shoot me. I had, this video would be a lot cooler if I was just scraping and talking about this just as casually. It's funny, I had 2 cigarettes and I lost it, and now I have no cigarettes. I'll probably find it in like tomorrow morning or something. Yeah, it's messy in here. Anyway, yeah, so if but honestly, is like a very generic, it's probably the most generic, and there is that, isn't there? And also I went to the Russian Academy for Cosmonautic Studies, and I farted, and then they kicked me out because my fart smelled so bad. They just didn't want me in there anymore, and I couldn't blame them. I left. Didn't leave in tears or anything, or in any major disgrace, but it was just understood that I was not a place I belonged. No, if I could go and I had to go get a vodka, I wouldn't, because vodkas are kind of, I mean, I won't be dramatic, I'll drink it, but like there's not a lot of like, they're kind of, I mean, it's like rubbing alcohol, right? I mean, that's the stereotype, but it's also kind of the truth of it. If I had to get a vodka though, I'd probably get like a Grey Goose, because I like the connotations. Yeah, but vodka's not a drink. I drink alone on my lonesome. Anyway, beer is more my forte. Yes, my forte is more my forte, and I've had a number of beers. I tour the world and the states for different beers, and I have some hard and fast opinions on the craft of the brew and the product of the craft. And one thing is that I just don't believe in IPAs. I think IPAs are it's part of the initiative to make that kind of social cultural initiative to make beer into like a new kind of wine. They're trying to push it up the social ladder and trying to rarefy it, right? And so they're just, by making it like less palatable, they're making it like more elitist. And I think that's all the IPA thing ever was. I mean, I don't really think the IPA has a natural seat in the or in the schedule, in my beer schedule, right? It doesn't have a natural seat in my beer schedule, place in my beer schedule, in the hierarchy, I mean, I guess if it were like a strange kind of autumn day and you were like, maybe it's like a fall kind of drink is the IPA. It's not for the summer though, and it's not for the winter. Like in the winter I have a stout, and in the summer I have a beer, a lager, or better yet a pilsner. So I'm not really sure what the season for the IPA is. And I speak mostly of the West Coast IPA because I was kind of born and raised in the Lagunitas territory, and Lagunitas was kind of overdrunk in my household growing up, so I know it pretty well. Along those lines, I think the what's that one? The Drake. I think that Drake's IPA is probably the best IPA. Or am I thinking of the Shoots? It could be the Shoots. Yeah, the Shoots IPA is the best one. I don't really know anymore. But another thing is that lagers. It's kind of hard to make a lager that kind of is like artisanal in the sense of like a craft brewery's product, because I mean most of the budget beers, my favorite's Miller Lite, but there's also like Coors Light or Coors or not a light beer, all the Budweiser, all that stuff is readily available and it's affordable, and it's a lager. And why would you, or if you didn't want that, you could get Corona or Heineken. Like most of the most popular beers, the kind of the working class beers, so to speak, those beers are, user friendly, right? They're affordable, right? So the idea that you pay an extra $1 or $2 for one is kind of hard to market, but it's definitely been done because all these microbreweries and craft breweries, they have like several different light, lager style beers, and that sell. So I guess it's more of a. I guess they're getting. I guess there's some kind of difference that I'm not acknowledging that is in the kind of the higher price point that's offered at the higher price point, higher value product. Anyway, but I do think it's kind of weird that they would get a beer that's like that. Like why not just get the cheaper version because to me a beer that's worth savoring is not something that's a summer beer. Like in the summer, I don't know, I don't really I think of consuming quickly and kind of getting it over with because I'm going to do all this other kick-ass stuff. I'm not going to just savor a beer. Whereas in the winter, a stout, and one of those heavily flavored stouts, the ones they're comedically flavored almost, like the peanut butter, the stout, the oatmeal stout, the chocolate stout, the coffee stout, and that kind of deal. That is great, and to me that is what brewing is all about. As someone who's brewed beer before, I find that stuff is more involved process, more steps, right? And I just think it's more rewarding in a sense. Of course, most people don't really want to drink that like a stout, like So if you brew a lager, then you're going to have more friends. But anyway, for on a personal level, I like the stout. There's something called the sour beer. Some of you know it. I've had it. A lot of you probably know it. They're good. I like them because they're kind of like a novelty gimmick. They're more novelty than a gimmick, because if the idea, like, it's really, you couldn't really market a sour beer to, like, I just couldn't see it being marketed with a lot of success. And I don't mean like obviously they're marketed to some success, but I don't mean that they're marketed to like mass, like corporate level chain success, like a McDonald's. You couldn't make a sour beer into a Big Mac, right? You couldn't sell it like you could sell a Big Mac, right? So I like it because I know it'll never really, become like this phenomenon, that I have to reckon with. And I can just drink it if I'm ever in the odd mood to drink one. In fact, even now I'd probably have one. I mean, although I'd probably, brush my teeth right after because of the acidity. There's also something called like the amber ale. I feel like that's something that I like, but I like it when I'm not looking at it directly. Like I like it when I don't realize I'm drinking it. Once I'm aware that I'm drinking an amber ale, I kind of like get this pang of disgust, and then I just like kind of swear off beer for like 6 weeks or something. Something dramatic. That's my impression. I mean, it's probably not true. It's like redheads, It's like no one wakes up wanting to date or sleep with or marry a redhead, but a lot of people do. So it must happen at some point. They must get caught up in it. Right? That's kind of how I feel about the amber ale. I don't know, man. Guinness, we can go to brands specifically. I think Guinness is a brand that, like, I had a friend who I almost did not want to be a friend with because he said that Guinness was his favorite beer, and he would say it in public. And I was just like so embarrassed for him and for myself, because it's not a beer that you're supposed to like publicly. I just feel that Guinness, unless you're clearly in an Irish pub that does Guinness in a kind of a quasi-authentic way, then fine. And honestly, you deserve it because they're going to pour it well, and so you're going to enjoy it a lot. But if you're just in like a fucking, like, I don't know, any old bar, a country sports bar or something, just don't get a fucking Guinness. I mean, I don't know. I just feel but then again, I am a stout fanboy, so if the reason I even have gripes with this, honestly, is that I kind of default to stouts a lot, and there are a lot of places they only have Guinness, so I'm forced to get Guinness, and it's a weighty, thoughtful, well-formed beer, but I don't want to have to default to it, and that's the crux of the issue. But the fact that my friend said it was his favorite beer, it shows that he was naive to the fact that he was just defaulting to it the whole time, right? Because he was like a guy who it was this simpleton, it was this like sophisticated simpleton, paradoxical mentality where he wants something that's weighty and sophisticated, but then he like settles for like the lowest common denominator in that class, and so I found that just kind of reprehensible. Anyway. A beer, Corona is something, I don't know, Corona is something that is like, there are certain beers that should only be handed out in mass, like, that are good if you have a ton of them, but you would never buy like one of them, and that's like there's Corona's a beer that you buy a lot of, but you never buy like one Corona, or like, fuck it, you probably don't even buy a 6-pack of Corona, right? Why? A 6-pack of Corona, right? So, yeah, there's that. Heineken is the same. Stella Artois is a bullshit beer. It's like it's just a phony ass beer. It's like a beer that's like tricks Americans into feeling fancy because they're deciding to get a beer that isn't obviously like an American beer. They're trying to get a European beer, right? So it just it irks me that they get that. Although it's not actually a bad beer. One beer I do like that is commercial, is well known, but to my understanding is kind of not like that. It's kind of hard for me to dislike, and by that logic it means I like it a lot. Is the Birra Moretti, which is an Italian lager that, you know, it has like this kind of thin, like clean taste that that's nothing but positive. I mean, I thoroughly enjoy it, but there's something a little odd about it being Italian, but I kind of like that it's Italian because it's an Italian beer. You know, stereotypes are hard to change. Anyway, it is a good beer, and if you haven't had it, I suggest you do. Although I wouldn't want to be. I don't want the secret to get out because I think it's just such a good drink. Top of that, there's okay, my favorite brewery. I mean, honestly, I say they're my favorite, but I don't really buy their beer that much. So how could it be my favorite? Is the Ballast Point out of San Diego. They have I think it's just I admire the graphic design on their beers so much. But to be frank, I have never been like amazed by their beers, and personally or anything. So I'm questioning why I was ranking them so highly. So I'm gonna disregard it and say that it's sort of like a superficial interest in them. And then there's another one called Stone, which I never really liked. But I like the Arrogant Bastard drink, and which is an IPA, so I guess there is a purpose. I feel like, yeah, I mean, maybe the IPA does have a place. All these beers are good. It's just they don't really they're not game changers for me. They're just kind of like I'm trying to find beers that distinguish themselves from like that kind of Sierra Nevada territory, like Sierra territory. What am I saying? That Sierra Nevada level, because a lot of these beers are on that Sierra Nevada level, where it's like they're commercially widely available. They have the stereotypings, the trappings of like a craft brewery, but they're not a microbrewery, and they're not necessarily the best beer for your palate. And that's what all this is about, is finding the best beers to have readily available, for any occasion, right? We're trying to get as many beers as we need to have for any occasion, right? And that occasion for me doesn't really include just showing people that you think Sierra Nevada is, what I mean? That for me, there is never an occasion where I would buy Sierra Nevada. It's the problem. I like it. I do like it, but I feel like it's in that convenience it's in the territory of convenience, the same as Bud Light is. It's just on the higher economic level. Like, if someone gets Bud Light because they don't want to fucking decide on a beer, so they just default to Bud Light. The same with Sierra Nevada. They're throwing a smaller party with richer guests and a richer invite list, and that's it. It's that same purpose. And for me, that's not really something that has any value, or is worth a lot of consideration. Now, I don't want to rip up on Sierra Nevada because I know the historian of the brewery, and he's a great guy. I've been to the brewery. It's a wonderful arts kind of, it's a wonderful factory out in Chico, but there's something about there's something that disinclines me from actually buying it for personal consumption. And to be fair, that applies to a lot of beers that didn't used to be that way for me. A beer that's like borderline like that, but I still can buy it, is the Deschutes out of Bend. That's a healthy medium. Like it's commercial enough. It's on the craft level, which is what I always kind of go for, unless it's something like Miller Lite, which is my preferred non-craft beer, as an aside. But on the craft level, Deschutes is a craft beer. It's well known. It's relatively well known. It's a craft beer, and I don't care about popularity, right? But I don't. If there's a point where if it's so popular, there has to be something wrong with it, because that means that the dumbest people are also drinking it, and if the dumbest people are doing it, there's something about it that's just how I view things, right? Because I mean, call it flawed, but if 80%, if 40% of the world's doing something, is it really going to be the best way for me to do it? And by me, I mean someone who enjoys the finer things in life. It's just I don't know. But Deschutes is it's like a good default beer for me. So if I go to a bar, I'll get a pitcher for my friends. I'll get Deschutes. I think there's a kind of if I alternate between Sierra Nevada gets thrown in there because someone always buys Sierra Nevada, and that's fine. But I just find it tactless. On top of those, what else is there? There's Racer 5 is an IPA. It's kind of yeah, I mean, I dismiss it because it's an IPA. I dismiss most IPAs. There's something called Anchor Steam, and it's a serviceable beer. It's kind of like it's just kind of an odd one because it doesn't really have a place in the world, but it's an odd one. I don't really want to discuss it because I just feel like it's kind of bland. It's very bland. We talked about Guinness. We talked about Yingling. There's Yingling. I've never even drank Yingling, and I know it's the oldest beer in America, but I never drank it. PBR is I used to drink it. That's like something you get at a bar when like you can't afford. You don't want to buy you can't afford like anything else. You just PBR. That's a beer you settle for. You know what I mean? I don't. But there are beers that like are in that category of beers you settle for that you actually enjoy, and what is it, Modelo? I think Pacifico. I can't remember. I think Pacifico is one of those that I might be. I wish I could look it up. It's either Pacifico or Modelo. Is one of those beers that I know I'm settling for it because it's cheap, but I still kind of like it. Like I still want to. I would buy it. Even if I could spend a lot more money. Old Style is a beer that I haven't even had, but I'm kind of yearning to try. Sam Adams, this just shows how little I know. I've never even really had a Sam Adams. I mean, I think I have, but before I even had the presence of mind to consider what I was drinking, so I don't remember anything about it. Another beer that's really kind of well known, but I think is on that kind of like the Deschutes level, although probably even lower, is Blue Moon's Belgian wheat, or the wheat style by Blue Moon. First of all, you got a really good name for a beer. You got a good location for a brewery, Colorado. And then you have a drink that's just a style of beer that is underrepresented. And it's the wheat style, the Hefeweizen, right? And I like that. But I like it. That's something. It's something you get. I like it at a dinner party. It's not something I get at a bar. It's something that I like served to me in a glass, in a bottle. I don't like that. I've had it in pints, and the fungus or the wheat. I don't know what it was, but it gets all mushed up into, and there's like this foggy haze. It's really nasty, and you can see it when it's poured. And maybe it was poured wrong, but I mean, it almost makes me dislike the beer. So I have to have it at a dinner party. I'm just kind of realizing for this podcast how picky I am about something as simple as, beer. It's kind of nuts. Anyway, what? I'm trying to cover the bases. I've had some beers that were Chinese, or no, they weren't Chinese, but they're like only marketed in places like China because they're like super watered down, and like real like Westerners like would not tolerate them, but the Chinese, they don't know anything differently, so they just get them anyway. And honestly, I had some of those. There are some that like are actually kind of sippable. It's on the level of like a Coors, like a Busch Light. Busch Light, by the way, is a beer I know why it's cheap, because it's just so fucking awful. I could drink, like, I could swear I could drink 20 of them, and like I would not be that. I don't even know if I would be buzzed. I mean, it's just an absurd. The alcohol content is like 2%. Really, it's kind of dismal. Anyway, that's kind of about it for the beer. I don't really know if I have any other opinions. I mean, there are some like local craft breweries that I've sampled, their selection or whatever, but there's not a lot I can say about it except that, maybe my favorite craft brewery. Well, there is, what did I have? I had one down here in the Miami area. It was pretty good. It had honey brewed into it. It was a kind of a citrus flavor by itself, but it had honey in it. And it honestly was a disappointing one. So that says something about some of these craft breweries. A lot of it is just like a premise without good execution. Like, and they're just selling the premise. It's like you get buffalo milk ice cream, and you're like, "Oh, buffalo milk! Oh, I'm gonna get it." I don't, it's like $8 a tub, outrageous. But then you buy it, and you're like, "Yeah, I mean, it's good," but you never buy it again because it wasn't that good, right? Actually, it's worse than that, because the buffalo milk ice cream, I actually enjoyed it, whereas with these beers, I kind of I didn't enjoy them really. I just kind of it was consumer trash. It was like they didn't even have to try that hard because they knew that the consumers would buy it anyway. They were that confident. So yeah, that was an issue. There's more. There was always more. Yeah, I mean, there's good beers everywhere, but I always go for the stouts first. To start out the night, you know what I mean? I go for stouts, and then I wind up with pitchers for my friends, and it's nice because sometimes it's like a roulette. Like, sometimes you pay for a lot of it, but sometimes you only buy one pitcher, and everyone else buys like two. Hopefully you're not ripping them off though, and hopefully you're paying your share. But it's kind of fun because you never really know how much you're gonna pay. Anyway, I am over and done. I should play a song. I can't though because I don't have my phone, and I really want to actually I'll play some music. I'll go to YouTube, play some music. Alright, I'll play some Def Leppard. Alright, just so I'm gonna tell you so I don't waste your time. If you hate Def Leppard, this is not what you should do. But